Over the years, some of the biggest stars to win at the Cheltenham Festival were either French-bred or began their racing careers in France.
Good morning.
The Ante-Post markets for the 2024 Cheltenham Festival are dominated by such horses. For example, 10 of the top 12 in the betting for the Triumph Hurdle began their careers in a French flat or jumps race. But for us bettors here in the UK and Ireland, it can be difficult to get a handle on the value of that form with a view to betting on the Cheltenham Festival. And that's why we've drafted in a French racing form expert who's going to share his insights that will hopefully give us the vital edge we need over the bookies so we can all hop aboard the gravy train right here on the Final Furlong podcast. Welcome to the show. It is great to have your company. I'm Emmett Kennedy, and today we are joined by French horse racing expert Adam Mills. He is not just a French horse racing expert, by the way, as Trish pointed out to me, our producer, that since 2019, Adam has offered a unique insight into the international racing from France, Spain, the United Arab Emirates, and much more. His website, prixdelahorse.com, aims to provide detailed analysis of both flat and national hunt racing, focusing on a more scientific approach to the form. Using a ratings model of his own design, Adam aims to bring accurate analysis of international racing form and how it compares between the various jurisdictions around the globe. Adam, welcome to the Final Furlong podcast.
Thank you very much, Emmett. Thank you for having me on. I'm delighted to see that one person has read the About Me page on my blog, so that's always a good start. But I'll do my best to take you through the French ones, and we'll have a good game of Willie Mullins bingo while we're there.
Oh, nice. Old school Final Furlong podcast reference. I believe we have a new graphic made up for Willie Mullins bingo. There's going to be a considerable amount of that played in this episode because we're going to start with the juvenile hurdlers. And, well, Willie Mullins, he had the 1, 2, 3, 4 in the Triumph Hurdle last season. He could easily have the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 this season. But we're going to start with the most prominent, at least ex-French horse in the market. Obviously, Burdett Road is topping the betting, but he's not ex-French, so we're not interested in him for the purposes of this show anyway. Certainly later on we will be. But Sergino is a little bit more prominent in the betting than all of the Willie Mullins horses. And this is, of course, your close personal friend, Nicky Henderson, training. Look, he was really impressive for the Donnellys on his hurdling debut at Kempton during the Christmas meeting. His form ties in with another Donnelly-owned horse, but who they sent to the Willie Mullins team, Salvador Mundi, who I'm sure we'll talk about in a few minutes. But give me your overall impression of Sergino. There was a lot of hype about him before that debut. What was it about his form in France that made him so interesting? And do you think he deserves to be second favourite for the Triumph Hurdle?
Oh, that's a good question. Should he be second favourite? Well, his French form obviously stood out. He won the Prix Wild Monarch, which is it's a listed hurdle for 3-year-old debutants, but it's got a really rich pedigree, and a lot of the French breeders and trainers target their really promising and precocious 3-year-old hurdlers at it. I mean, it's on the day, he was a bit of a surprise. He was sent off at 22 on the PMU, so it's not like he was sort of gambling in a certainty, but he absolutely tanked through that race. Travelled superbly well, as he did at Kempton, really. Really impressive performance, nicely settled on the bridle. There were no problems with him, whereas when we come to Salvatore Mundi, there might have been a couple of issues, but everything about that race has really stacked up. There were 5 winners in behind him. The time was 7 seconds quicker than the Fillies race, which I think is always a good guide. The Fillies race over the same course and distance on the same day. That race was actually won by Nara, who's also with Willie Mullins, one of the many juveniles he's got. And then I looked at the Kempton race, and we were away over Christmas, so I sort of caught up with this when I got back. But when I looked at it at first, the only bit I saw was a brief clip on Twitter of him jumping the last 2, and I thought, oh, he's not that impressive, and he leaves his back legs in 1. But then when you look at the times, he ran the fastest final circuit time of the day of 3 minutes 12.7 seconds. From the second last to the line, he was the fastest. For me, the only thing I can knock him with is I just wonder, one, whether he's experienced enough. And if I would like to see him going to Cheltenham on the back of 4 runs, I think he's probably going to go there on the back of 3. I think he's likely to run at Cheltenham at the weekend if Nicky keeps his bottle. And I guess for me, the only thing I would say is at Auteuil, he got himself out of trouble at the last because he got his legs all wrong, but he managed to get over it and then he quickened away perfectly. And the fact the fact that he won, is great credit to his temperament. But again, at Kempton, he made a couple of mistakes, and I think you're not under pressure when you're making mistakes. If he gets to the Triumph Hurdle, what's going to happen if he's got one of Willie's on one side and maybe Burdett Road coming at him with a late run? What's he going to do at those final 2 hurdles? But I mean, his record is 2 wins from 2. You can't knock him. Is he the right position in the Triumph Hurdle market? Probably, yeah. And if you'd asked me to look at this weekend, they're due to meet at Cheltenham, I think he'll beat Burdett Road. And I have a huge amount of respect for Burdett Road, because Burdett Road won in November when I thought Milan Tino was the biggest certainty to ever reach these shores. And Burdett Road kicked him out the way like there was no tomorrow. So if you draw those form lines, I think the British have got a better chance this year than they did last year. But what I would say is I'd be worried about Sergino's prep. What I'm hoping is when he runs on Saturday, it's a real battle. I want him to get involved in a battle, and let's see what he does. If he's making jumping errors under no pressure against largely inferior opposition, what kind of jumping errors might he make when he's up against genuine Triumph Hurdle contenders? And that's why I say the run at Kempton, the couple of mistakes when he left his back legs in one, makes me think, is his concentration the issue? Or is there something more to it? And if he was mine, he would have had 3 runs in the UK by the time he goes to Cheltenham, because I think his jumping would suggest he needs more experience.
But Adam, I mean, that's a scandalous thing to say. This is a racehorse. You can't expect a horse to race. That is not Nicky Henderson's philosophy, after all. I mean, if he could give every horse just 1 prep run before Cheltenham, wouldn't that be ideal for them all?
Maybe. And the problem is that the Nicky Henderson Fan Appreciation Society will point to the fact that Pentland Hills won the Triumph, having run at Plumpton a couple of weeks before. Now, he had flat experience and it's different, but it's horses for courses. But I would look at Sergino and I'd think, this is a horse that needs more experience, because one of the big angles I always want to look at is if a horse makes a mistake at the end of a race when they're tired or they're off the bridle or the ground is really against them, fair enough, I can live with that. We all make mistakes. But when they make mistakes for no obvious reason, I kind of worry that might be accentuated when they're really under pressure. Because there's no doubt in my mind, if he's going to win the Triumph Hurdle, he's got to come off the bridle. This is going to be a really big field by the looks of it. There's going to be, I don't know, Willie might have 5. There's no way Sergino is just going to be allowed to lob along on the bridle behind the leader and come with a late run. He might do, but to my eye, I've got lots of doubts, and that's why I hope when he goes to Cheltenham this Saturday that I can just put those doubts to one side, because I genuinely think he's a better hurdler than Burdett Road. And Burdett Road has kicked a couple of hurdles out the ground. So both of them have jumping questions to answer.
Yeah, and Burdett Road has been very keen as well. Now, at least he's got big festival experience. He's been to Royal Ascot, won under Neil Callan. Neil Callan was very impressed with him that day. Harry Cobden is going to be on board as well, which is a massive advantage. It doesn't appear as though Paul Nicholls has got anything for the Triumph Hurdle, which is very unlike Paul. He hasn't won it for a few years, but he's normally got something to go, but it doesn't appear as though he does this year.
Well, he does, but I don't think he'll run it. So I don't think it's going to... Because
I should clarify that, actually. Yeah, there's the horse that he's bought and is already talking about as a Gold Cup performer. So in other words, the reason he's saying that is, don't ask me about this horse for Cheltenham, because he's not going there this year, which is fair enough. We'll see with the Adonis, is something often emerges on the scene. The thing is, the Triumph Hurdle has changed dramatically. Like, the thought process used to be, don't really have a bet on this race until the Adonis, or at least the entries for the Adonis are out. And you're looking for something really useful from the flat. Now, that would be Burdett Road, but he's almost the exception that proves the rule. We're not getting those horses anymore. They're going to Australia, Hong Kong, America. There's too much demand for those horses in other jurisdictions and other markets. So we're getting these national hunt-bred French horses, and Willie Mullins has been excelling with those. Willie has won 3 of the last 4 runnings of the Triumph Hurdle. I think he'll win it again this season, but we shall see. Gordon has won 2 of the last 10, and Nicky's won 2 of the last 10. So they're the guys you're looking at in terms of who is going to supply the winner. All eyes on Sergino this weekend. You think he'll beat Burdett Road, but the jumping needs to improve. And that'll be a second run after a wind up. Let's move on. The Gigginstown-owned Storm Hart was very impressive at Punchestown on his hurdling debut. There was a moment in this race where a horse made a mistake. He runs into the back of him, and that could have been a disaster. But in the blink of an eye, he's just run right away from them. And the market was then assuming that, oh, he's number one. But that's not how Willie has been talking. He's not putting anybody off the horse by any means. He's just really emphasizing, I've got a lot of good juvenile hurdlers. Where does Storm Hart rank for you?
It's very... There's 2 ways of looking at this. One hand, you've got the Storm Hart who won Punchestown. I mean, Racing Post ratings gave him 132, which would put him a pound behind Burdett Road. I mean, that alone is superb. I mean, I love to do time comparisons on the same day, and so we had a good example that day because Sir Gerhard ran in like a conditions hurdle.
Yeah,
admittedly a bit further, but if you were to time them from the second last to the line, Storm Hart is pretty much bang on 4 seconds quicker than Sir Gerhard. Now, admittedly, he starts behind him, but I still take the view Sir Gerhard he's a Cheltenham Festival winner. He's probably a grade 2, bottom of grade 1 kind of hurdle prospect, going to run in the stayers. And on his hurdles debut, Storm Hart was able to run a better time than him from 2 out to the line. So on that front, you're thinking, blimey, this thing's got a lot of ability. And I think, personally, I would like to see Storm Hart run at the DRF, and I hope they front run with him because he's got loads of experience on the flat. He had 5 runs on the flat for Philip Segord. Got to a rating of 37 kilos, which would be sort of 80 to 82. His win came at Mont de Marsan over 12 furlongs. You know, the horse he beat in second, he put 6 lengths between himself and Shelby. Shelby is a genuine 80 horse. He's won a couple of nice races in Spain, albeit that's probably at a lower level. But the other thing I would say with him is when you look at Storm Hart's breeding, his dam won 3 times on the flat. She was a decent flat horse. His grand dam had a go over hurdle. She was 0 from 5. I think his flat experience probably means that really helped him on his debut. And I just wonder how much improvement there is to come. But I also think that flat experience could mean he runs a big race at the DRF because he's got a lot more experience of the track than some of these others. And he's very professional. As you said, he sort of goes in the back of another horse, but it doesn't, there are some horses that would blow their brains. For him, it's just, I've done this before. I know what I'm doing. And you can't really fault him. I mean, that was a big debut performance. If the Racing Post ratings are to be believed, then he should be right there. I've noticed at the moment he's the favourite for the Spring Juvenile Hurdle. Probably that market's not mature enough yet to suggest it's a stable viewpoint as well, but he deserves his place at the DRF. I think if he finishes in the first 3, he'll go to the Triumph. I guess the only stick I could maybe beat him with is he's a very nice flat horse, but he got to his limit. He had 5 runs. He eventually won at Mont de Marsan, but I just would worry for him as kind of if the Triumph Hurdle needs you to run to 150, perhaps would normally be enough to be in the finish at a Triumph Hurdle. Is he capable of doing that? I'm not sure. I don't think there's a stone or 2 stone of improvement to come. I think he's going to run well at the DRF, and I think that's where he'll peak.
This is boding well for the horse that I like for this race, because maybe this means this is the one you think is Willie Mullins number 1. And so in this way, I'm going to look super clever. Of course, you could also just completely crush me right now and say, nah. As we come along to, this is the fun thing about not talking about this beforehand. So, Bunting. Oh, you've got a good poker face. So I don't know if this. Oh, I don't like that though. I don't like that. So he's going to have his second run. I believe he's headed to the Dublin Racing Festival as well. We should point out, if you really like one of the horses that Willie is going to run in the Spring Juvenile Hurdle, or Gordon for that matter, or Joseph, you need to back that horse before the DRF. Understanding that your bet could be a busted flush straight away, to go with another poker term, Because if you get beaten, you're probably like Lossiemouth. She was beaten, but very unlucky. Tiger Roll was beaten in the Spring Juvenile Hurdle before going on to win the Triumph. So defeat does not preclude you from winning the Triumph Hurdle. I loved this fella's debut performance for Willie at Limerick. It was on soft, heavy ground. His form in France was on soft, heavy ground as well. Pulled away from the field that day to go and win. I don't think there was a whole lot said about the fact that it doesn't take an enormous amount of money to move the market anymore the night before, but he was a significantly shorter price on the day than he was the night before. So that suggests stable confidence. The fact that it was Limerick and under Sean O'Keefe and not Paul Townend at Leopardstown means there wasn't as many eyeballs on him and maybe not as many people were talking about him. But there was a bit of chatter about this fella beforehand. I asked Patrick Mullins about him on this very show, and he said they'd worked him in the Curragh and they like him. But that was then. This is now. What do you think of Bunting?
Well, firstly, I mean, Tony Bloom doesn't make bad decisions, would be one. But for me, Bunting, I look at the debut at Fontainebleau and you think, well, he won by 7 lengths and he missed the break. This was a flat maiden. He missed the break. He's bustled to get back into position. And then when they get to the 2 furlong pole, Fontainebleau's got a run in of about 3.5 furlongs up the straight. And it was the ground is officially described by France Gallup as very soft, 3.8 on the penetrometer. But there was a lot of rain that day. So I think we're looking more at soft, heavy in places. We're getting towards that way. And he's absolutely hammered them. Now, he's surprised his connections because he was 38 on the PMU for his debut. But when you look at that form, he's beaten some good horses. The horse in second, De Florio, he's now rated the equivalent of 83. He's won 3 races in Switzerland. The third is Salawi, who's 103 rated group placed flat horse. And Bunting has absolutely sideswiped him. Like, it just pushed him out of the way like he wasn't there. I just wonder with Bunting in the long term whether they've got dual purpose plans with him, because I don't think that's the plan right now. I think the Triumph Hurdle is what he was bought for, but I just wonder in time if they might look at him and look at his pedigree and think we could maybe have a little swing on the flat here as well and see where we get. But I mean, the race at Limerick, I don't think you can fault him. I'm not sure he beat a great deal, but his flat speed definitely got there, and he had a lot of power when he needed it over the last 2. Racing Post ratings gave him 116. I think maybe you would say that's a little cautious. I mean, he might be a 120, but he's got work to do with the others. But that said, he's had 1 run. He's another one who's going to go. I mean, I wouldn't want to be Paul Townend making this pick at the DRF.
No.
I think the way I would play Bunting, if I was keen, which there are others I'm keener on, but if I was going to play Bunting, I would have a little bit of filth, as my grandfather would say, and I would go and find the non-runner no bet concession with it, whichever firm has got him, and I would back him non-runner no bet for the Triumph, because if he goes to the DRF and he bombs out, I don't think he'll have I think Willie would take the view he probably isn't going to win the Triumph, in which case we'll wait for Fairy House, Aintree, Punchestown, and we won't go. Because he's only had 1 run, the DRF will be his 2nd run. I don't think there'd be time to get him handicapped for the Boodles, because you need 3 runs for a mark there. So I think, particularly if they have in the back of their heads, as I do, that he might be a dual purpose prospect as well. I think it's win or bust at the DRF. I think he's got to finish in the first 3 or 4, otherwise he won't go, in which case I'd want the non-runner no bet for your bet, Emmett.
So to clarify, this is your first round of Willie Mullins Bingo on the Final Furlong podcast, and you are recommending to our listeners and now viewers on YouTube a scumbag each way bet on Bunting.
Oh, I am a scumbag. If you like, I'll show you my state man each way bet and each way Trixie. I'm quite happy to take a bit of each way or a bit of non-runner no bet, but I have to take the non-runner no bet for any horse that isn't going to have 3 runs by the time they get to Cheltenham, because if they haven't had 3 runs, they can't run in the Boodles. Therefore, they've got to run in the Triumph. And although Willie runs a lot in the Triumph, he's got so many horses in his yard that if he entered all of them, there'd be 2 divisions of the Triumph. So he's got to make that kind of decision. And I think Bunting will definitely run at the DRF because they need to know. The other thing they probably need to find out is, can he do it on better ground? Because his flat run was on soft ground. Limerick at Christmas is a bog. So what happens if he gets involved at Leopardstown where it drains much better? Does he have the speed to go with them? if it's a quicker ground, because I think Cheltenham on the Friday is highly unlikely to be any worse than good to soft.
Should point out that time form, they have him a fair way down their rankings as things stand. They've got him on 136p as opposed to Sergino, for example, who's 151p. They also say heavy ground at Limerick, soft ground in France. So they would very much concur with you. I am of the mindset to just jump to Karesi. We will come to High Wind.
Okay.
The reason I would jump to her is because she is top rated by time form. She's got 161, no P, no plus. That's the rating they've given her. She's also pretty highly rated by the Racing Post. Burdett Road is in there. So for the purposes of the Spring Juvenile Hurdle, they've given Burdett Road a 147. He's not going to go for that. Calaconti then comes out on top for them. Then Stormheart. Then Karesi. It was a filly for Kenny Alexander. Made her debut on Boxing Day, St. Stephen's Day, behind Calaconti under Danny Mullins, similar to Galar Marceau, but got a whole lot closer than Galar Marceau did to Lossiemouth, and was being beaten by a horse who, to be fair, had experience for Gordon Elliott. So where does she rank for you?
I think she's the best that Willie's got. That would be my view of Karesi.
Stop press. Goes and places
scumbag
each way bet
let me
now.
make my case. First thing I would say is she's got experience in France. And if they come from France, I like them to have jumped hurdles. Because if they've jumped hurdles in France, they've been schooled in France since they were 2-year-olds. They've got loads of jumping experience, so you don't need to worry about that. She won by 5 lengths on debut. She's already won a Grade 3, the Prix Sagan. The French handicapper gave her an official rating of 68 kilos. Now, since 2022, the BHA has converted French ratings at £2 per kilo. So that means on that system, she'd be given an official rating of 136. Right now, Burdett Road has an official rating of 137. She's got a £7 mare's allowance. You can do the maths until if it was a handicap, she'd be well in. But for me, I think she's got experience. I love her attitude. If you go back and watch her win in the Grade 3 Prix Sagan, this is a filly who wants to win. After the last, she's asked for an effort and it comes. Now, I have my reservations about the race at Christmas. She was second to Karakon. The overall time was slow. The final circuit was the slowest on the card by 6 seconds, so it massively favoured the horses who raced more prominently. Karesi was the fastest horse on the day from the second last to the line, 45.28 seconds. She was even quicker than King of Kingsfield, who absolutely tanked through a maiden hurdle. I have a massive alarm bell ringing, though, which was, why on earth was she keen? She's got experience of the track. I watched her wins in France. There's no sign of keenness. In the Prix Sagan, she's settled in midfield. They're going too slowly, so halfway, she's pushed forwards. She races on her own down the centre of the track. She hits the front 3 out. At no point is she lit up. She's never keen. She's settled perfectly. What I'm hoping is it was just a bit of freshness. First run for Willie, new surroundings, new track, new hurdles. If she settles, I think she's got a massive chance. And although I'm yet to have a serious bet for the Triumph, I've got to back her before she goes to the DRF, because I think she'll improve massively. And I think in a truly run race, you'll see her settle and there'll be no problems. And if she wins at the DRF, she'll be favourite. Absolutely. Whatever wins at the DRF will be favourite for the Triumph. And it's just a question of getting that guess right. But I think if you've got Willie's to line all of his up in a hurdles race at Close Sutton, she'd win.
Damn. And 2 of Willie's winners of this race were fillies as well. Of course, obviously, Lossiemouth last season. At the time on St. Stephen's Day, I was thinking this is almost a carbon copy of Galar Marceau. She's almost been cloned and brought back for this race. But the keenness angle wasn't something that I was aware of. I wasn't aware that wasn't something she had displayed in France and now is something that she has displayed. She'll need to knock that off, because if she's going to win at the DRF, she can't do that again.
She might get very lucky and get away with it at the DRF, because Willie's got so many, something's got to make it a truly run race. What I'd be more concerned about is if she was keen again, that would be enough to stop me backing her for Cheltenham, or certainly to make me consider laying it off or cashing out, because that's a very long run in at Cheltenham, especially on the new course. And I just think she would pay for being keen if she was. You'd also have to bear in mind the DRF is busy, but it's nothing compared to the 75,000 at Cheltenham on Gold Cup Day. there's a lot of things to light up a 4-year-old filly. There's so much ability there. I'm so convinced that she is Lossiemouth Mark II, but they have got to get her to settle. Now, it might happen because if you watch Lossiemouth's debut, she was keen as anything, and she still won. So, you know, that I don't mind them being keen and enthusiastic, but there is a point, as you said, that's kind of the more she pulls, the harder it's going to be for her. And if she does it again at the DRF, I'll just walk away. And if she wins, I'll take my medicine. But right now, if I had to have a bet for the Triumph, it would be her, because I think she's got massive improvement. And there's no way Willie will allow it to be a slowly run race again.
Yeah,
Something
and he had 4 runners in the DRF at the DRF for the Spring Juvenile Hurdle 2 years ago. He had 6 runners in it last year, and he's arguably got an even stronger team this year. So it's going to be a big team for Willie.
Well, let's also not forget last year's race when he ran a horse called Jeu de Fay.
Oh, my God.
You know, that worked out really well for you, Willie, didn't it? Took out the horse who had so much in hand, she came out and won the Triumph. So I think there will be, this year, he will still have the same number of runners, but I'd imagine each jockey will be specifically told, this is what you do, this is the pecking order, and if your horse is beat, don't you dare get in the way of something else.
Yeah, you can sink back through the field like a stone, but don't take out your owner, stable, companion, mate in the process. That was not good. Patrick
and Danny, if you get into a mess again, you're both leaving the yard. So that'll be the approach. You know, that's got to be that. This is the problem when he has so many, and they're all unexposed. They haven't run against each other. You know, I'd imagine if Willie was honest, he'd say, "I don't know what the pecking order is right now. I've got loads of horses with 1s and 2s and 3s next to their name. They could be anything."
Yeah, the great thing about him is he pretty much does say that, and I think that there's then an attitude from people who think, he does know, he just doesn't want to tell us. Genuinely think he doesn't. This horse is 14-1 for the Triumph Hurdle. Like if you want to follow Adam's expertise here, and I certainly am, you've got to be taking that 14s. Now, if she goes and wins, and you don't like how keen she was, and something is, say, Storm Heart is a fast finishing second, and in the moment you're thinking, that's not going to work at Cheltenham, well, you can cash out for a profit, almost certainly.
That would definitely be my angle. I mean, I looked at the 2 prices. I think when I looked at this one, she was 7-1 to win the Spring Juvenile.
Yeah.
And she's 14 for the Triumph. So I won't back her for both, because then I'm going to shoot my bolt both times if she blows her head off and finishes out the back and pulls up. So I took the view, if she wins at the DRF, I think she'll be 4s for the Triumph, 7-2 if she wins impressively, maybe even 3s. Therefore, I may as well just take the 14s, because there's nowhere else she's going to go. Willie is not going to run a 4-year-old in the Mayor's Novice Hurdle because he's never done it. So he's not going to break that tradition. She's had 3-4 runs now. This will be her 5th. He's not going to run a filly in the Boodles. His record in that is not that great, and I don't think he's going to run a filly in it. So the only race for is the Triumph. So unless she absolutely blows her brains out at the DRF, she is going to run at the Triumph, whether she wins, finishes 2nd, 3rd, 4th, because he's got nowhere else to go. He may as well run it, and she's got a £7 allowance. So I took the view, if I back her at 14s for the Triumph, I'm going to get a run for my money. If she goes close enough, but she's keen, I can still get out if I want to. And I just think of all the horses here, her bubble is the least likely to be burst. So therefore, I want whatever Ante-Post bet I try and have, and I've learned this lesson over many, many years, but whatever Ante-Post bet I have these days, I want to get a run for my money. Or I want to know I don't need that much to happen to get my money back. So therefore, I wouldn't back her each way. I'm not one of these sort of, I don't really want to get involved in each way because I'm going to lose double my stake if it goes wrong horribly. But I just think she's 14s right now. If she wins at the DRF, she'll be favourite. I can get out that way. If she goes close at the DRF, she'll still run in the Triumph and I'll have a runner for my money. And as long, just the keenness is kind of that nagging doubt in the back of my head, that little voice that's going, why was she keen? And I looked back at my notes and thought she wasn't keen at Ortoy. So this morning I watched back the Prix-Sagan, the grade 3 she won, and she wasn't keen there either. And I'm thinking, this is a little bit like, what caused that? But maybe it was just the fact that they went so slow and she was just itching to go faster because actually, having been keen, once the race got going when they jumped the second last, she was the fastest horse on the entire card from the second last to the line. Now, to have the ability to do that, having still pulled really hard, I think I'll give her a pass, and I'll hope that at the DRF she shows who I think she really is.
Well, I'm obliged to then ask you about another ex-French horse, Karakon, because there was an awful lot of talk about her before her debut at Navan, which she's 1,000,000 to 1 on, and we didn't really learn a whole lot about her. Then she comes unstuck against Nürburgring at Fairyhouse, but back in the winner's enclosure. Where does she rank for you?
She's good. I mean, the debut, I think, was a 3 or 4 runner race at a stupid price, and it's sort of like, they're the kind of races you just put a line through. But I don't really worry about the Nürburgring defeat, because the one thing about that Fairyhouse race is she's been in a race this season. She's been in a proper race with a driving finish, and she's shown a good attitude. I think she was massively favoured by the way the race panned out at Leopardstown, but she still won. She still held on. You can't really, there's no way of knocking her. There's no way of looking at this horse and thinking, oh, she's not good enough, or they're going to improve past her. But for me, I guess I just worry with her. I just think I know roughly where she is. I would give her a rating of around 140 or so on the time form scale, 140, 145. So, but I don't think when we get to Punchestown in May, I won't be looking at Karakon thinking she's definitely going to win the mares next year, or she's going to run in the champion hurdle. I think I'll be looking at her and thinking this is what she is.
Okay.
And so whilst I think she'll run a race here, and I think she'll run a race at Cheltenham if she goes, I'd look at her and think, is there another stone to come? I don't know. Not sure there is. I think she's experienced now. She's been in a race. She's got a great attitude, nice, straightforward horse. But I don't think there's tons of improvement to come. Whereas with Karesi, I can make a massive case for improvement.
I'd be inclined to think that she's a nice horse, sets a good standard. It'll be really interesting to see what she does in the Spring Juvenile. She doesn't interest me for the Triumph Hurdle. I could be completely wrong, in which case possibly passing up a very nice horse, but I'm with you on that. On Karesi, I noted that she was wearing a tongue tie in France, hasn't in Ireland. That wouldn't really explain why she was keen, but is it something that you're looking to be reapplied? Does it bother you in any way?
I don't look at tongue ties. I think tongue ties are just something trainers put on. If they suddenly rolled her out in blinkers and cheek pieces, I'd be walking away. But tongue tie is just, it is what it is. It's not a wind up. It's just something that sometimes they put on, sometimes they don't. I'm yet to be convinced that a tongue tie brings out any improvement whatsoever.
There are some horses who greatly benefit from it. Ven Ottery, the horse back in the day in the Queen Mother Champion Chase that was excelling in a tongue tie, and for whatever reason, his former trainer, still owner, told Paul Nichols, don't worry, I've got the entry sorted, Paul, don't worry about it. Didn't enter him with the tongue tie declared, and the horse ran a nice race, but Paul was saying he would have basically won had the tongue tie been on. Anyway, Audrey Turley is going to have a big day on Gold Cup Day. Galopin Des Champs will bid to become the 9th multiple winner of the Gold Cup in the 100th running of the race. And assuming he's won at the Irish Gold Cup, then he's going to be odds-on favourite to do that. She won the Triumph Hurdle a few years ago, of course, with Burning Victory in a race that the Moors do not want to be reminded of. Where does High Wind rank for you, son of Girac, who was certainly impressive the other day?
Yeah, he's sort of come from left field, really, in terms of, if you'd said to me in September, give me a Triumph 1, 2, 3, High Wind would have been nowhere near it. But suddenly, when I sort of started looking, he was on my list of horses that I knew were in the yard, but I'd never really looked at him in so much detail. But actually, when you really start to look at him, he was very smart on the flat. He had an official rating, the equivalent of 88. He's by Girac, which alone should be an indicator this is a good horse, because he is the coming sire. And last year, if you read my blog last year, I'll hold my hands up and say there's a post that I wrote about Girac the Brave when I said he hasn't got the minerals to make into a decent hurdler. You don't need to back him. Something to those
I love that phrase, by the way. That's a Guy Ritchie phrase. He's not got the minerals, son.
Well, it's something someone said to me, and I thought, yeah, because actually, if you watch his Girac the Brave's flat form in France, you'd think, he's a dodge pot. He doesn't do it when it matters. And then he went into Willys. I duly laid him on his debut. That went well. To say that when he came back on the bridle, I had this sudden feeling of, I'm going to delete the Twitter app for a couple of hours. But it was just that kind of like, you know, and you know, he didn't make the triumph, unfortunately, but he won the Galway hurdle. So my opinion of Girac has now changed, that he's not just a good flat sire, he's a great sire of solid 3 and 4 year olds. And High Wind has proved that. He used his flat experience to win at Punchestown. Yeah, there was an error. There's a bit, he did a lot wrong. He didn't look that clued up, but to win how he did, you can't really knock him. Yes, there are definitely other juveniles who've achieved more, but I'd also think you'd look at that High Wind debut and think there's so much more to come. And all of a sudden, this is the kind of horse that I'd be looking at and thinking, he may not win at the DRF. The experience may be needed, but down the line, he's the kind of horse that I'd look at and think he could go well in a triumph at a double figure price. He could also be the other kind of horse that they look at and think the more he runs, the better he gets. And maybe I think there's a race at Fairyhouse for him. There's a race at Punchestown. There's Aintree. Whether they've got so many that I'm kind of, the game of bingo is beyond a joke. But High Wind, I would say, has got at least another stone of improvement in him this season, because that debut was just, he was good on the flat, but he took his form to another level because the amount of mistakes he makes, the way he's running, you think, oh, it's the kind of thing that I'd have probably thought you might want to lay him in running here because he doesn't look that comfortable, but just the engine is there, the ability is there. And he has really surprised me. I wasn't expecting to be discussing him as a Triumph Hurdle contender. And if he improves again at the DRF, he definitely will be.
Yeah, he's certainly a very intriguing one, and it looks like there's improvement to come. He wore headgear a few times in the flat, but on his final start in France, they left it off. And I think there's an argument to be said he should have finished closer that day. No headgear for Willie Mullins on debut. They can always call for it, but it doesn't look like he needs it at the moment. A very, very interesting one. There's a couple of horses that we haven't seen yet. And this is becoming a bit of a habit with Willie Mullins, where he's even had horses make their debut for him in the Triumph Hurdle. If I remember correctly, didn't Il Était Temps make his debut at the DRF in Grade 1 company and then go straight to the Triumph Hurdle? He's not afraid to throw the juvenile hurdlers who have experience from France in at the deep end in Britain and Ireland. But Marlborough, owned by JP, so Frankie Tightlips will be coming after you if you say a little bit too much here. But,
he doesn't
obviously
know where
JP,
safe.
not yet, he doesn't. But JP is Frankie's got his ways.
Ah, my Joyzy muscle. It's so good to see you. Did you have a nice flight, Johnny Tightlips?
I ain't saying nothing.
I understand. How is your mother?
Oh, hey, who says I have a mother?
JP's taken the Triumph Hurdle twice in recent years with Ivanovich Gorbatsov. How did he beat Apple's Jade, by the way? And Defi Desoy. Where does this fellow rank for you amongst the juvenile hurdlers?
Well, I mean, he's the first words I've written down about him when I was in the notes for this show was he literally could be anything. And I know not everyone's a fan of that phrase, but that to me describes a horse that could be anything between 110 and 170. I heard Ruby say that he thinks he's the best looking 4-year-old in the yard. I'm no paddock judge, so I don't know what that means, but Ruby obviously knows what he's talking about. And just if you look at the way they went about, they went and bought him, and the form of his win in France in the Prix Grandac is excellent. The time was nothing special, but the form is superb. The horse in second would now be rated 130. The third has gone 3-year-old chasing. The fourth has won, is rated 124. The fifth has been sold to Ireland. In sixth was Batman Girac, who some people will tell you is this superstar is going to win the Boodles. We might get time to get to him. The seventh has won. He's 122 rated. And the horse who was ninth and beaten out of sight is rated 117 and he's won. That form has worked out really well, but the Prix Grandac is just one of those races that throws up great horses. It's just a good trial. It's at the right time of year. You don't get the early precocious ones. It's a couple of months into the Autois season. But I look back at the recent runnings of the Prix Grandac has included Beau Zenith, who's Gary Moore's smart horse from last year, Blood Destiny, Porticello, who was a Grade 1 winner for the Moors, Kel Destan, who's with Paul Nicholls, Ajas was in that race, who was the horse Rachel Blackmore rode in the Grand Steeple to Paris eventually. On the Go, Frodon, Maracuja, Je Saint Eloi. This race has got a serious pedigree. So I'd imagine, in my head, I imagine that Frank Berry reads this kind of thing and the JP have got this sort of power team in a bunker somewhere that does all this kind of study. But I just wonder if they looked at the pre-Grandac and thought, this is a race we want to watch. And then they watched it and they saw Madgeborough win and thought, hello, this is a good horse. And they've got him. He's won a race. So they've got no novice status to protect. They've got to have a go, surely, at some point. He could be anything. I honestly don't know. I don't know if that prize for the Triumph is good, bad, ugly. Who knows? He is another one that if there was confidence behind him for the DRF, and if we get there on the day and he's 4s or 5s, he's another one that you could have a really sleazy, non-runner, no-bet approach to the Triumph Hurdle with, because he's only had one run. That they're not going to go to Boodles with a horse of this quality. He'll either run well at the DRF and they'll have a go, or he won't. So you could certainly make a case, and I could I guess this is how I'd describe him probably if I had to put it in a soundbite. In 2 years' time, he might be a champion hurdle contender, or he might be with Ben Haslam, and I don't know when that's going to be. I just don't. I cannot put a figure on this form. The French form checks out. He hasn't been seen since. He could be anything. He just could. I don't know. I don't know. I can't back him. I can't lay him. I just one run. The form's worked out really well. The race has a great pedigree. I could definitely see why people would want to back him. And if JP decides to unload the clips at the DRF, then that would probably suggest that they think he's even better. But who knows? This is one of the problems with having experience in France is great. But when you've got one run with a powerhouse owner, what do you know? And you just don't know. This could be absolutely anything. But I wouldn't put anyone backing him. The only thing I would say is get the non-runner, no bet. Because if it goes wrong, you'll get your money back.
That's a brilliant line, by the way. That's a line that's going to be stolen by people for Cheltenham preview nights, possibly even by me. One of the things that I found very intriguing about it is where he's come from. So his trainer in France has linked up with Willie Mullins in the past to supply Capodanno, Zenta, both for JP, and one JP missed out on, Stateman. And trainers are a creature of habit, and if you build up a good enough relationship, they will ring their fellow counterparts, like the point-to-point trainers in Ireland. They've got deals existing with Willie Mullins, Henry de Bromhead, Gordon Elliott, Gavin Cromwell. That's why those boys have got such a tight grip on the best Irish point-to-pointers. And if the British want to get their hands on them, you're going to have to pay way over the odds to get them. And it will be the same in France as well. So is this Zenta 2.0 a Grade 1 winner at Aintree? It remains to be seen. Asdenam, another one, and I'm sure I'm after butchering that pronunciation, as Anzadam. Hey!
Really interesting horse. He's with the Donnellys, who have got a multiple-pronged attack on the Triumph this year. He's won 2 runs, 2 wins, 1 at Bordeaux. Form's all right, not too bad. Then he goes to Compiègne. Really good time figure. Fastest final circuit on the day. Fastest from the second last to the line. Does it all on the bridle, jumps the last, the jockey shakes him up, and then he looks around after 3 strides and realises, oh, actually, I don't need to shake him up. We're going to win this at a canter. Now, the Racing Post ratings gave him 105 for that rating, for that race. And I love Racing Post ratings for UK and Irish racing, which is the system they were built for. Sometimes with French racing, you get a rating that the form book would suggest isn't quite right. So he's never off the bit. The horse in second has a rating of 130, the equivalent of 136. And he gave him 3 kilos. There's loads of form there. The third is a good horse. The fourth won a chase at Auteuil next time around. I mean, he's another one who could be anything. But the key is, all of these horses, they've won races in France. So there's no novice status to protect. There's no point holding on. You may as well have a go and find out what you've got, because you've got a 4-year-old who can't run in a novice hurdle next season. So you've got to find out. I'd imagine he's another one who's going to go to the DRF. But this is the difference with this one. He's had 2 runs over hurdles in France. So if he runs at the DRF, and he could get a mark. So it's interesting, I thought, with Amsterdam, and he has moved a little bit in the market. He's 20s with most firms for the Triumph, 16s with the firms that are non-runner no bet, but he's 10s for the Boodles this morning with Bet365. And I just wonder with him, let's say he finished 5th at the DRF, showed a bit of promise, but probably wasn't quite up to the grade 1 level and up to the fillies. The BHA would look at a little bit of his French form. They'd look at the run at the DRF, and he'd probably get a rating between 133 and 136. Something like that would be my guess. And I just wonder if they'd look at that and think, we could, if the DRF would suggest that he's going to be an also ran in the Triumph, the Donnellys have got Sergino. I can't really think of a horse the Donnellys have got for the Boodles. Why wouldn't they have a go, particularly if they get a decent mark? Albeit that we should acknowledge that Willie's record in the Boodles is not great.
Like Risk Bell ran okay for him in the Boodles last season, and then has subsequently proved that she's just better than that. The obvious one, the horse that I'm sure is still giving you nightmares and you're still getting therapy over, so maybe it's best that you just cover your ears for a second, as I say.
No, you can say his name because he's lovely. So I forgive the horse. I will never forgive Townley.
This isn't... So it's not going to trigger you. You're not going to have PTSD
No,
when I say...
go ahead.
Gaelic Warrior.
Yeah.
Oh, he's all right. He's okay. It's all right.
He got beaten for a mark of 129. Firstly, I mean, how did he even get the mark of 129? But, we're fair play. But, it happens. If he'd been beaten in that race by a 4-year-old Constitution Hill, I'd have got over it. He got beat by a 4-year-old Brazil. But that's life. Another one I'd point to actually a few years earlier is a horse called Voix de Rêve, who was...
Oh, God, that's one that triggers me. Jesus. Graham Wiley's horse.
Yeah, and I think it was Ruby. I will need to look that up because it's bugging.
It was Ruby. He was
Ruby,
swinging away on the bridle. He had the race.
He came down. So Willie you could definitely make a case that Willie could have 2 extra Boodles winners in the last 10 years with a bit more luck. So let's not worry too much about that. And I think you also have to acknowledge now that Willie Mullins loves French 3-year-old prospects. The yard in the last few years has been full of them. And as much as we all say, he's going to have 4 or 5 in the Triumph, great. Let's say he has 7 in the Triumph. He's still got 3 or 4 candidates for the Boodles, all of which would have a realistic chance. So Amsterdam, if I was pricing it, which race will he run in at the festival if he goes, I would say it's 4 to 7 he runs in the Boodles. And I would say it's, 2 to 1 that he runs maybe in the Triumph, and then the difference that he doesn't go. Obviously, if he finishes in the first 3 at the DRF, he'll go the Triumph. If he doesn't, I think he'll go the Boodles. And I think there's a lot more ability than that RPR of 105 would suggest. Certainly the times and the way he went through his races would suggest that he's much better than that.
Timeform take a very different view. They give him 147p, which reads much higher, obviously, but just to put it in context, Stormheart is on 155p. They value that French form a whole lot more. And it's going to be interesting to see what he does at the DRF. I'm also reminded Ethical Diamond is currently a 33 to 1 shot for the Spring Juvenile Hurdle, indeed. And I'm sure it was Racing TV that Willie was doing an interview for. Could have been with Gary or possibly Johnny Ward. And he was being asked about his juvenile hurdlers. And he said, if you'd asked me going into Christmas, I'd have said Ethical Diamond was my best. So just further exemplifying that he's got a lot of strength and depth and isn't quite sure which of them is the best.
Let me give you, I use my own rating system, which I've built from kind of getting standard times and standard final circuit times for certain ages. I won't go into the science of the Excel sheet because I will be honest and say I wrote it down on a piece of paper and my wife built it. But what I will say is Sergino, I have him running to a figure of 94 when he won at Auteuil. And I have Amsterdam running at 86. So he's a little bit behind Sergino, but that would also make allowance for the fact that Amsterdam won at Bordeaux and Compiègne, and he beat smaller fields than the big field Wild Monarch race that Sergino won. But he's had 2 runs over hurdles. He's won them both. I'm a great believer that I want to stick with this kind of horse until he gets beaten. Because once he gets beaten, that'll tell me what he is.
Okay. I'm even more intrigued now. But it's a great point to make that Willie Mullins' 5th string in the Triumph Hurdle would probably be favourite for the Boodles.
Well, if you think about last year, he absolutely dominated the Triumph, but he could easily have looked at the Boodles and thought, you know what, with something like Zenta, you know, if they'd have campaigned her differently and got her a handicap mark, they could have had a go at that. I think we could all agree she might have gone close. Jazzy Matty was a long-term plan for the Boodles.
Yeah.
But if you believe the hype last in September of that season, Jazzy Matty made his debut at Auteuil, and there were all these rumours that Gordon's already got him organised, and Gordon's flown over in a helicopter to watch his debut, and it's like, I haven't seen a helicopter. You know, I think the Equidia cameras might have picked up multiple Grade 1 winning trainer Gordon Elliott in the small crowd at Auteuil.
Just that would have been a talking point.
There are lots of reasons to look at the French form and to take these things into account, but what I would look at is I think the Boodles winner is going to need a bit of experience, but I also think Willie might look at the horses he's got and think, I want more than one dart at the Boodles now.
Before we wrap up, there's a couple of horses that I want to talk to you about. One of them is one of the most blatantly obvious horses, because it seems as though everybody thinks this horse is going to win the Boodles. And as you rightly point out, maybe Willie Mullins should have won that race by now, so we should stop saying he's got a terrible record. Maybe with a bit more of the rub of the green, he'd be a dual winner of that race. But Batman Girac. So this is another horse I was asking Patrick about, and he was also saying about this fella that they'd taken him to the Curragh for a gallop. They liked him. He looked awful at Ferryhouse. Now, something must have been wrong that day, because that couldn't possibly have been his true running. He then turns up on Boxing Day, St. Stephen's Day at Leopardstown, and ran better, but enough to be not exactly backing him for a triumph, which is a massive price. But the race that everyone is intrigued for him about is the Boodles. Where does he rank on your ratings, and what do you think of him overall?
Well, it's really difficult to tell. I mean, on debut, he was beaten soundly by Madgeborough, but I can forgive anything being beaten on debut. And he was ridden on debut like it was a sort of, let's have a bit of an education and see where we get. Then he won at Compiègne, he won by 3 lengths. The ground was pretty heavy. He was always in command that day. But one thing I will point out in that race is it wasn't the deepest. And there was a Simon Munier and Isaac Suede horse called Keep On, who was a non-runner. Didn't turn up. So and that did have a bit of an effect on the market. And I just wonder, maybe he was slightly flattered by winning a relatively weak contest at Compiègne on heavy ground. Then he goes to Ireland. And I guess the thing for me was I looked at the Ferryhouse race, thought, well, he's 7-4 fav. You know, they obviously, someone in the Mullins yard thought this thing's got a bit of ability, because you had the likes of Karakon and others that they could compare at least notes with in terms of what they looked at, and he just didn't run his race. And then they go to Leopardstown at Christmas, and I don't want to say it's schooling in public, but it was close to it. At no point, in my eye, was he ever likely to win that race. No. And the reason I think the Boodles, I think there's 2 reasons. Firstly, I think he's had 4 runs, so he's one of the few horses at this stage in the Mullins yard who are qualified for the Boodles. And then obviously they did the old thing where, like, we'll give him a handicap entry in the UK. We've got no intention of running, but it forces the BHA to put a mark on it. I don't know. Is it? I think it's Martin right saying his mark is 133. I'm yet to be convinced he's run to a mark of 133 in the 4 races of his career. But this is also, we have to bear in mind that this is with probably the greatest national hunt trainer of all time. Yeah. And there is a possibility that something went wrong at Ferryhouse. They don't know what. They then decided, right, we've had 3 runs. We're not going to win the Triumph with this one. Let's just get him ready for the Boodles. So we'll go to Leopardstown at Christmas, make sure that he gets around the track and everything goes fine, and away we go. Would I back him as the current favourite for the Boodles? No. I think I could make enough of a case that he isn't as well handicapped as he looks. I can only judge him on the form he's achieved. So if they are sitting on a horse with £15 in hand, fair enough. Good for them. They've obviously executed this plot superbly, and if he bolts up in the Boodles, there'll be all the shrewdies going, I got on at the right price. I spotted he was a Boodles entry. I think I could probably name 4 or 5 that I'd be much more interested in for the Boodles than him at the current prices. But equally, if you do fancy him for the Boodles, you've got to back him now. Back him Ante-Post, because on the day, the Boodles will be 6 places, and you will find that is a Willie Mullins horse there's no way on earth he goes off 15-2 if he runs in this race. He's got to be shorter because everyone wants to be part of that Mullins gamble. And with each way on offer as well, the bookies will shrink him in so that he's not a particular each way loser. I don't know. I haven't backed him myself. I can't decide whether he's just a badly handicapped talking horse like Bad was a year ago in the Boodles, or is he one that they're sitting on? He's one or the other.
It's funny you say that because I was just reminding myself that I was taken by the whole Bad thing last year, really taken in by that, particularly when Rachel gets booked. You're just thinking, oh, this is a plot. And the machine starts to kick in. He was talked about on all the Cheltenham preview nights. No one talks about that horse anymore. No one does. He was just very useful for that narrative as a dark plot horse. And I think you've summed that up perfectly. He seems to be the horse who's filling that role this season, Batman Girac. And look, if I'm wrong about that, then, and you're wrong about that, then fair enough. But we're talking about a horse who's 15-2. You're the French racing expert. You go through this form way more detail than anybody else does, or at least than most people do. And you're not convinced by what you've seen so far to suggest that this is a bet at those prices.
I haven't. I mean, I can only go on the form he's run. He was sixth in what looked a good renewal of the pre-Grand Nac, but he was sixth, beaten quite a long way. And I just look at his Compien form, and I think the second hasn't run since. The third, if that was in the UK, would have a BHA rating of 106. So suddenly I'm looking at that and thinking, where's this 133 come from? At Fairy House he's bombed out, and at Leopardstown they haven't tried. So what is he? Allegedly. I don't know. And if I'm going to have a bet in a handicap, firstly, I wouldn't bet in a race like the Boodles yet. I'd want to have a much better idea of what's going to go here and what's going to go to Triumph. And I look and think Boodles winners generally have a bit in hand. And there will be 10 sets of connections looking at their horse thinking, one more run, get a mark in the Boodles. That's our plan. And I just think I think there are others who are much likely to be much better handicapped on the day. Now, what I don't know is maybe on the gallops at the Curragh and at home at Close Sutton, this is a 145 horse and he just hasn't shown it on the track. But the two times in France that I've seen him run when he was trying, he's not a 133 horse, so I can't back him.
Eloquently put. Just be wary of these horses. There are horses that are put up on Cheltenham preview nights. They're talked up on social media. This is the one. We've cracked the puzzle. He's already towards the top of the betting, and there's enough there to make Adam go, don't know.
I can have some disgusting after timing, but last year when Tony Mullins put up Bad, I think it was on the Paddy Power preview show, he put up Bad.
Oh, it was. You're right. I was really pissed about that. Somebody had told me on TalkSport, oh, this is a horse to watch out for. And before I got a chance to say it on, like I said it on TalkSport, so that was great anyway. But before I got a chance to say it on the podcast, there I am driving along, listening to the Paddy Power one. I'm like, crap, Tony.
Well,
and of course, it didn't
I
work.
messaged a very good friend of mine I worked really closely with, and I said, what is this? I said, this horse was not even on my radar. To be honest, he wasn't even on my list of horses that have been sold. I said, I'm not really interested. I looked at his figures and thought he's not there. But at the same time, there was part of me thought, you know what? In the past, I've opened my big mouth and gone, this horse is a pile of shit. And then, of course, up he comes and he bolts up and you think, oh, crap. And then you look like the idiot because you've studied the form and gone, he's not well handicapped. So I'm going to hold back on Batman Girac because there is the chance they're sitting on him. But the Boodles is a bit of a graveyard for favourites. And it's just one of those races that, because they're all unexposed juvenile hurdlers, the rumour mill has a much bigger effect on the market than it would do if we had more form to go on. And I can't be having him as 133 horse on what I've seen so far.
Yeah, and also there's plenty of betting up, like there's loads of betting opportunities at Cheltenham, but in those handicaps, particularly the Boodles, that's where you want to be taking the Aidan O'Hara approach of swinging for something at 20-1 plus. Like that's where you're going for that. Proceed with caution with those horses. And for me, for the Fred Winter, that's a race you want to be looking at least 14-1 up. That's what you want to be thinking about. So we started talking about Sergino. The horse he beat was Salvatore Mundi. He's gone to Willie Mullins.
Yeah.
What is your take on him?
Well, I think that Pre-Wild Monarch is a great piece of form. Salvatore Mundi is kind of I can understand why he went to Willys, but I think the reason he went to Willys is different to what most people would assume. I think there's lots of people think Joe Donnelly bought Sergino and Salvatore Mundi out of that race, and Willie had first pick. And I don't think it's as straightforward as Willie Mullins and Nicky Henderson played rock, paper, scissors, and the winner gets to pick whoever. So the way I look at it is
that would be a fun image, though.
I'd love that. Can you imagine that's how all French racehorses should be decided. The trainers go into a room and they play rock, paper, scissors, or arm wrestle. You know, that just, I mean, if they're arm wrestling, Shark Hanlon is going to win at the Triumph every year, I'd imagine. But that's the
Shark was this close. He was this close to getting on the so. This close.
This is, you know, what a way. But the way I really look at it is on the day when you get these big newcomers hurdles, I want to look at how the horses run, but I pay a lot of attention to the PMU. If you've got a really good one, and particularly if you're thinking of selling it, the chances are you might be tempted to have a little few quid at the same time. Sergino was 22s on the PMU. Salvatore Mundi was the third favourite at 10s. Now, when you watch Salvatore Mundi, he's on and off the bridle. He's definitely finding it harder work. He's not as professional as Sergino. But as they turn for home, the two of them start to pull clear. And Salvatore Mundi is absolutely looming up. And if there was such a thing as detailed in running markets, Salvatore Mundi would probably have been 1.3 as they jump the second last. He's got the stands rail to help him, which is massive at Auteuil. And he just doesn't go through it. Sergino jumps to last and finds more. Now, part of that would be that Sergino is definitely the stronger traveller on the evidence we've got. But I'd also consider that Salvatore Mundi had found it harder work. He'd been on and off the bridle. He'd probably worked harder to get there than Sergino had. So there is a case for saying the two of them are very closely matched. His dam is a half-sister to Le Unique, who was a good horse for Alan King. She finished third in a mare's hurdle behind Quevega a few years ago. There's a nice pedigree. The race has worked out all right. The third and fourth are both pattern class horses. They've placed in listed and grade 3s. There's lots to like about Salvatore Mundi, but there's a really cautious tale needed here. He hasn't won a race, so he's technically still a novice. So what do they do? Now, they've had other horses in the past that they've looked at. I've got an example of Jit Langi, who's a good example. They kept him back last year, brought him out in May. So there is a chance with Salvatore Mundi that he won't run in the Triumph. And the way that plan will work is that Willie Mullins will probably run him in the DRF. Given the fact he's given him an entry would suggest they may as well run him. And I think what will happen is he'll run at the DRF. If he finishes first or second and they think he could win the Triumph, he'll go to Cheltenham. If he finishes fifth, they'll say, you know what, he's still a novice, we'll just put him away for next season because he's got so much potential. And that is why Salvatore Mundi is in Willie Mullins' yard, because Willie Mullins has a history of trying to buy good horses from France, but also those that he can use the novice status with.
Clever. So this could be, it's not impossible this fella runs in the DRF, gets beaten, finishes a good fifth, but is then ruled out of Cheltenham. He actually might go to Cheltenham anyway. This may very well be the Il-Etait-Temps route, for example.
It could be.
But you're making a really important point here. This guy's a novice. You can protect him for next season. This could very well, similar to Il-Etait-Temps, won a grade 1 novice hurdle last season, was beaten in the Supreme, but still very nice horse. He would appear to be a horse, though, that has a little bit more potential about him, a little bit more scope about him. I think would be the first thing to look at. And look, the thing that leaps off the page to me about him is he's by the same sire as Allaho and Epatante. So you're getting a proven, ex-French horse who's got very useful form, who's by a proven sire whose horses improve with age.
It's not necessary, although French juveniles are miles ahead of, if you took a 3-year-old that's, you know, bred in Ireland or Britain, the French would be ahead. But it's far too easy to assume that the French horses can only win the Triumph hurdle. And for me, something that we'll perhaps come on to next time is when you look at the patterns that Willie Mullins follows, are very similar. And if he's got one that's a novice, he's sure as hell not going to waste it in a juvenile novice hurdle if he doesn't have to. So if he doesn't win a big race, it says, okay, we'll have another novice season. I don't mind that. And that, I think, is one of the key things with Salvatore Mundi. by all means, run him at the DRF. Let's watch him at the DRF. If the market really speaks for him, you can probably think they think he's going to go close. But if he doesn't finish within a couple of lengths of the winner, or if he doesn't win the race, I think they might also think, you know what, we can put him away and we'll have another novice season with him. The last thing I think that they want to do is risk his novice status and risk his future by blowing his brains too soon. And if it looks at the DRF like this is too much, you probably won't see him again until after the season ends.
That's excellent. He's already 5-1 for the Spring Juvenile Hurdles, so he's fancied. But remember, Willie Mullins bingo, you have no idea what's going to happen until these horses actually line up. And even then, you got to wait until after the race to find out how it's all going to pan out. Of the horses we've talked about, so it seems pretty clear to me who your Triumph Hurdle pick is. That's Karesi. Who is your alternative to Karesi as things stand?
I think you could play. I think there are two bets that I'd want to have now. The first is Karesi, but I would back her for the Triumph, not the Spring Juvenile. And some people might say that's madness, but the way I view it is, if I back her for both and she bombs out of the DRF, I've lost twice. So I'd rather just back her for the Triumph, because I think she's got to badly underperform not to at least run in the Triumph and give me a bet. And I think she's a bit of value, because I don't think she'll go off the 14s that she is now. If you don't like that approach and you just want to have a bet, you should back Sergino, because I think Sergino will beat Burdett Road. I've just got this feeling that if as long as he jumps, he's going to beat him, because I just think he's got more about him. He's got more travelling. The track will suit him. And therefore, if I think Sergino will beat Burdett Road on Saturday, I'd want to back Sergino for the Triumph now, because if he runs on Saturday and beats Burdett Road, he'll be favourite for the Triumph. It's quite a simple equation. So, but again, I don't really want to bet in the Spring Juvenile or indeed the Cheltenham race this Saturday if I can avoid it. What I'd much rather do is be patient and get the value for the Triumph. So if Sergino's entry on Saturday is confirmed and Burdett Road turns up, I'll back Sergino for the Triumph, and I'll do the exact same with Karesi, provided she's declared for the DRF race.
And is Aznadam, is this your Boodles pick currently?
Yes, but I can't back him. I can't back him because I'm just going to have to take the hit on the price. I know he's 10s for the Boodles. I think he's 16s non-runner, no bet for the Triumph. The reason I think for the Boodles, he'd be a great shout. I think he's a good horse. I think he's going to get a nice mark. And let's say he gets the same mark as Batman Girac 133. I can make a case that Amsterdam's a 133 horse. I can't for Batman Girac. So, but the problem I've got is Amsterdam is not yet qualified for the Boodles. So I don't want to back him for the Boodles and then finally turns up at the DRF and he finishes 3 lengths down in third, because then they'll go the Triumph and I won't get it. So I'm going to have to take my medicine with that. And if that means I lose 2 points on the Monday after the DRF, and I have to go and back him for the Boodles, so be it. Personally, I think he'll end up in the Boodles because I think there's just too many in the DRF. There'll be something better than him.
That's almost exactly what I'm thinking as well. And look, I know that there's a fear of missing out and you're looking at a really attractive price, and it is the lure of an Ante-Post bet, particularly when you think you found one that's a very fair price. It's a difficult thing to pass up on. But if you're patient enough, if you're honest with yourself, the amount of times you would have backed a horse that is a big price, don't just remember the ones that you were right about. Think about the ones you were wrong about. Even if you look at the big Saturday races this weekend, how many of those horses at one point did you think was good enough to win a Grade 1 novice hurdle or a Grade 1 novice chase at Cheltenham? And they never quite got to that level. It's not that they're disappointing. It's that you were wrong about how good that horse was going to be. So if you take that approach, I would rather back, this is going to sound weird, I'd rather back an Asdam, or whatever the hell his pronunciation is, because, you know, it's me and French pronunciations, and I've got to butcher that. It's almost in the contract with the Final Furlong podcast. I must butcher the pronunciation of a French name. But I would rather take 9-2, 5-1, 4-1 on the day, knowing everything, as opposed to speculate at the top price 16-1 now and then find out, oh crap, I was wrong, and he's not even going to run.
Exactly. We are recording on an afternoon when I'm going to put a black armband on because it's been announced that Thelem is injured. I have a slip for Fulham at 20-1. This morning he was 4-1. But being shrewd and getting a good price makes no bloody difference whatsoever because he's not going to run. And it takes, sometimes you'll see people say, oh, if you get the value over time, just get the value. That's great. But with Ante-Post betting, I think I heard Gavin Lynch say this on your podcast just before Christmas. He said, you've got to be 90% certain they're going to run. With Amsterdam, I can only be 40% certain they're going to run. So even if I'm risking 2 points, if I back him at 10s for the Boodles now and he bolts up at the DRF, I'll look like an absolute idiot because I'll have 10s about a horse for a handicap who's 5s for a grade 1. So I'd rather take you know what? I won't bet in the DRF race. I'll have Karesi. I'll have my Triumph Hurdle bet on her. And then I will watch Amsterdam and I'll see how he runs. And if he runs how I expect him to, which is where he'll finish somewhere between 4th and 6th, then I'll back him for the Boodles. And if that means I get 7s instead of 10s, at least I've got a runner at 7s rather than risking a non-runner at 10s.
Yeah, it makes way more sense to me, that approach. For all that, you can be seen to be leaving value on the table. But if you did that for every single horse and every single race, you'd constantly be... the bookies would love you. There'd never be any restrictions on your account. You'd never have any of those incentives taken off you. They'd absolutely love you to be back in that kind of horse. How far would Cheltenham have won the Stairs Hurdle by?
What should we say? I could say anything now, couldn't I really? I think that coming to the last, there would have been 4 horses involved in the finish. And I think it would have been Sir Gerhard would have been ridden forward and prominent. He would be tiring as they get to the last. Irish Point will be one side swinging on the bridle. Fulham will be the other side swinging on the bridle. And you'd have Teahupoo in between the two, struggling to keep up because the ground's too quick for him.
How dare you?
When they jumped the last, Gaetan Mazaret would have looked at whoever's on Irish Point, winked at him and scooted up the hill. So I reckon 5 lengths. But I can say that now. You know, I can say that because he's not going to run and no one will ever be able to prove me wrong.
I'm really sorry for you. I was kind of dismissive of this horse. First of all, I was way out of line. And I was saying all this before Ante-Post had bolted up in the Dakota Star Novice Chase. And that's not to say that because a novice chaser goes and wins a British Grade 1, that suddenly means that this fella would have won a Grade 1 hurdle race. But in recent weeks, I've been watching back his races in France. Jeez,
well,
he's
as we don't need to cover him, I'll just give you one very quick stat that I knocked up that I thought has been really clever. So Fulham won the Grand Prix d'Automne at Auteuil in November. He gave 4 kilos, so 9 pounds to the horse in second. There's a horse called Ine Anjou. She is a wonderful mare. Her syndicate owners come and sing songs before the race. It's like a football match when she runs. It's brilliant.
Oh, class.
Fulham beat her by 10 lengths, giving her 4 kilos. In the Grade 1 in 2022, Ille-Francais gave her 2 kilos, and he was only 8 lengths in front of her. So if we think Ille-Francais is a superstar, Fulham has proved that he's done even better. I have to just move on with that. That's life. At the age of 37, I've learned to back losers. You know.
Adam, all I can say to you is I'm sorry for you. I know that the black armband is on. I know that you have requested complete silence in the house. You're going to be listening to somber music. Sarah McLachlan, I will remember you. That's going to be playing left, right, and center and dreaming of what this horse can do next season. But the good news is there is still time for you to get stuck into Teahupoo. Who wins the Stairs Hurdle on the snap?
Oh, you can predict the weather of it. I didn't know that.
I've got George Gorman with a water tank all set up to go Wednesday night, flooding the new course. All right. Really enjoyed this. Looking forward to catching up with you again next week as we delve into the novice chasers. There's a Ille-Francais that might be interesting to talk about. Could be your horse watching. And interestingly, has an entry for Cheltenham, although I don't think there's any chance of him actually taking that up. But some very interesting handicap hurdlers and novice hurdlers to talk about, including one you have been trying to persuade me about via the Twitter DMs, who's currently 40-1. More on that next week on the Final Furlong podcast. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I really hope you've enjoyed it. You can follow Adam on Twitter, GG Banker on the tweet machine.
That's the one, yeah.
GG Banker. We will link to him on X, formerly known as Twitter, as well. If you haven't liked this episode, please do. If you haven't subscribed to us on YouTube or on your various podcast apps, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever it is you're listening to us, make sure you hit that as well. It's a massive help with the algorithm. Believe us, it really is. And we really appreciate it. From Adam and myself, we'll talk to you again very, very soon on the Final Furlong podcast. Look after yourself and each other. God bless.